The Prime Minister apparently is going to overhaul the asylum appeal system, limiting the authority of judges to address a mounting backlog. Being reported in the Times, apparently this all comes amid escalating protests, of course, which we saw yesterday over migrant hotels.
Britain has been plunged into uncharted waters. The UK Supreme Court, the highest legal authority in the country, has given an unexpected ruling. Prime Minister Keir Starmer must resign. What's the charge? Financial malfeasance, fraud, and misuse of authority. The decision has set up a firestorm. Crowds gather in the streets yelling, "Lock him up." The headlines scream of betrayal. Starmer, who based his career on the rule of law, is now accused of violating it. Even more astonishing, he refuses to stand down, calling the ruling a political coup. Never before in contemporary history has a sitting Prime Minister openly disobeyed the Supreme Court. The crisis has rattled the very underpinnings of British democracy. For a man once dubbed Mr. Integrity, the fall from grace could not have been steeper. And now the nation faces a grave question. Will Keir Starmer cling to power at whatever cost? Or will the rule of law triumph in a constitutional battle unprecedented in centuries? To appreciate the scope of this catastrophe, we must track Keir Starmer's ascension. Starmer, a barrister by training, made his name in the courtroom by defending civil liberties and rising to the position of Director of Public Prosecutions. He was careful, upright, and unwavering in his principles, a man who seemed immune to scandal. That image of integrity accompanied him to politics. When Labour was struggling after years of internal warfare, Starmer emerged as the man to calm the ship. He promised professionalism, skill, and most importantly, honesty. He positioned himself as a counterbalance to Boris Johnson and Liz Truss's turmoil. By 2024, Labour had stormed to power on his promise of clean government, restoring trust. But fissures quickly developed. The economy stalled, immigration skyrocketed, and Starmer's stern language frequently rang hollow. Then came the whispers, secret presents, extravagant perks, and suspicious donations. They appeared like whispers at first, but investigative journalists discovered records proving undeclared benefits worth tens of thousands of pounds. The disclosures were in stark contrast to Starmer's public persona. Here was the man who denounced conservative sleaze, entangled in a web of undeclared Rolex watches, private aircraft and expensive wines. Offshore accounts and consulting fees fueled even more suspicions. It was enough to elicit a Supreme Court inquiry of unparalleled extent and severity. And the court's decision sent shockwaves across Westminster. Chief Justice Dame Sue Carr delivered the verdict in sad tones. The court determined that Starmer had failed to register gifts and payments totalling £124,000. These included a Rolex watch at £9,000, private jet flights worth £39,000, and pricey wines provided by lobbying firms. Even more incriminating information included offshore accounts linked to shell businesses and a £52,000 consulting fee, paid by a weapons contractor just before a positive policy decision. The decision was clear. Starmer had broken the ministerial code, disobeyed the law, and could not continue in office. In a democracy governed by the rule of law, says Dame Carr, no leader can stand above accountability. The political repercussions were swift. Starmer had spent years criticising Conservative scandals, ranging from Boris Johnson's parties to Tory benefactors' tax avoidance. He identified himself as the moral alternative. Now, published emails show his funders pushing advantageous defence procurement practices and Starmer's government complying. The man who promised cleaner politics has been accused of selling influence behind closed doors. The hypocrisy was awful. Two-tier Keir, originally a jab regarding immigration policy, has become a shorthand for his hypocritical standards. In Parliament, anarchy broke out. Labour MPs were astonished as the opposition benches demanded Starmer's resignation. Outside, thousands gathered in Parliament Square, brandishing signs reading "Resign now" and "Starmer shame." Senior Labour figures started breaking ranks. Whispers circulated that cabinet ministers were preparing resignation letters. A leadership contest looked unavoidable. But Starmer refused to bow. In an angry statement, he referred to the Supreme Court verdict as a political coup, intended to topple his government. His attitude astounded observers. Never before had a Prime Minister publicly challenged the judiciary. The defiance triggered a constitutional crisis. The rule of law and separation of powers have long served as the foundations of British democracy. But suddenly a Prime Minister was openly disagreeing with the Supreme Court. The palace intervened. King Charles cut short a family vacation and summoned key advisers to discuss using the royal prerogative, a move unprecedented in contemporary history. Civil servants surreptitiously curtailed Starmer's access to critical information, believing he had lost credibility. Rumours circulated that military leaders were formulating contingency plans in case the stalemate developed further. Britain's stability appeared to be precarious. The crisis shook the world. The pound plunged as investors left. European allies expressed significant concerns about the UK's political stability. The White House has voiced deep concern. NATO leaders questioned if Britain could still be counted on as a pillar of the alliance. Domestically, rage spread. From London to Manchester, protesters were in the tens of thousands. Protesters demanded Starmer's resignation, and several called for criminal charges. Millions saw the man who previously represented law and order as a lawbreaker. His rise, based on claims of honesty, had led to a dramatic fall. Nonetheless, he clung on, claiming he was the victim of political vendettas. The collapse of Keir Starmer is unique in British political history. The Supreme Court has never ordered a Prime Minister to resign, let alone refuse to obey. The confrontation has revealed a fundamental fault line. What happens when the rule of law collides with a leader who refuses to step down? Starmer's disobedience recalls Watergate in the United States, when a president's misuse of power strained the bounds of democracy. However, the British method differs. There is no formal constitution, only convention and precedent. When a Prime Minister refuses to follow the rules, the entire structure cracks. The crisis is rooted in hypocrisy. Starmer's political brand was founded on honesty, legality, and respect for institutions. During turbulent times, he exuded power with this appearance. However, the Supreme Court exposed him as a leader who allegedly pocketed gifts, disguised privileges, and traded influence, the very faults he previously criticised in his opponents. The political consequences are huge. Labour, once bolstered by electoral success, is now staring into the depths of internal dissent. Reform UK, Conservatives and smaller parties are already cashing in on the chaos. Internationally, Britain's reputation as a stable democracy has suffered. Allies question if a government led by a Prime Minister at odds with the judiciary can be trusted. What happens next could set the tone for a generation. If Starmer persists, it may normalise contempt of judicial power. If he falls, his departure will serve as a warning tale, demonstrating that no leader can outlast the rule of law. Regardless, Britain is venturing into uncharted territory. Keir Starmer's rise and collapse have played out like high-stakes political theatre. From courtroom lawyer to Prime Minister, he once represented the promise of integrity. Now, accused of impropriety and punished by the Supreme Court, he represents hypocrisy and disobedience. The situation has spread beyond one man. It is now a test of Britain's institutions. Can the courts, Parliament and the Crown maintain the rule of law when the head of state refuses? Or will Starmer's opposition push the country towards constitutional collapse? The British people face a stark choice. Do they accept a leader who holds power in defiance of the law, or do they demand his resignation to restore legitimacy? History is paying attention, and the outcome, whether Starmer resigns with dignity or in shame, will determine not just his legacy, but also the strength of Britain's democracy. Let us know what you think down below in the comments.